All right, this is the fifth lecture of my series on the Civil War. It's a real short one. It is a long history of Southern elites using racism against blacks to manipulate the Southern white masses. All right, so let's review the situation as it was in 1860. Here's a political reality, right? North had double the demographics of the South, and this was only going to get worse. The North had four more states in the South. Okay, that's eight more senators, and this was only going to get worse, and it's going to get worse bad. All right. I mean, the only two states that could possibly go slave was Oklahoma and New Mexico. All the vast territory in the Northwest is going free, including parts of the Mexican secession, Nevada, for example. So here's the last four states. All right, look at the progression right before 1860, right before the Civil War. 1850, that's California. That started the trend here. Then you had 1858, that was that Minnesota, I believe, and then you had 59, that was Oregon, and then you had Kansas in 61. All right, look at this, bam, 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 right before the Civil War. Like, oh man, we're done. Right? The vast majority of remaining territory was going to go free. Only Oklahoma and New Mexico stood a chance of going slave, and they were crap. Right? Well, New Mexico was desert, sparsely populated, barely anyone there. That's no demographics, and it was totally not suitable for slave plantation agriculture. It wasn't suitable for agriculture at all. Oklahoma was largely Indian territory still, and they couldn't vote. Right? The Democratic Party had fragmented into three: the Northern Democrats, Southern Democrats, and Unionists, right? And that just killed their chances, especially at president. All of this meant that the South was done politically, uh, which meant they were done economically. And so their only hope was to check out of the Union, but to do so meant war, which the elites, the less than 1%, were too few to fight. Therefore, they had to whip up the support of the Southern masses, and they did so with fear mongering. That always works. I swear people fall for that all the time. People think you can't fool me. Man, they fall for this every damn war. Uh, the whole the threat to free the slaves was bogus. Multiple laws to corner white males into the Confederate Army. I don't remember all these laws, but I remember things like this. Right, right. Hey, you don't fight, you go to jail. You don't fight, you lose your land. You don't fight, your family has no means of support. They're out on the street, right? Right. I mean, they're using your family's leverage. All right. Okay, Bacon's Revolt, 1676, about 100 years before our Declaration of Independence. So Bacon was a landless wannabe, right? He wanted to wage war on the Indians to take their land so he could be somebody, right? He's got no opportunity here. Now, however, the people who kind of control things were the established landowners. They held political power. And they didn't want to wage war because they would end up paying the brunt of the costs here. And they already had all the land they wanted. So then Bacon tried to have these guys overthrown, and he did so by inciting a slave rebellion. Right now, at that time, there wasn't just black slaves; there were English slaves and Irish slaves as well. And some of these white slaves were chattel slaves for whatever reason. I don't know all the details, but they fell into chattel slavery, just like the black slaves, bought and sold permanently. No chance, of their indentured servitude running out. All right, and the rebellion was eventually put down, but it was bloody. Right? I mean, a lot of these, slave plantation owners, you know, lost their lives, and so to reduce any chance of the same thing occurring in the future, the landed elites, the slave plantation owners, used racism to divide white slaves from the black slaves. It was divide and conquer. And they're like, okay, this works. So they use that from then on. Now, plantation owners strove to convince poor whites. Now, in this slave plantation economy, right, there's no other there was very little opportunity for white people, right? So they're dirt poor, okay? So, to kind of pacify them, the slave plantation owners strove to convince poor whites to overlook how they are exploited by the slave economy. And while poor whites earn little money, they're little well off, little better than the slaves. They still earn a psychological wage. It was called treated with deference, admitted to public functions, allowed to vote. They're made to feel superior in just their whiteness, even though they're dirt poor, ignorant, no schooling, right? To keep poor whites from forming coalitions with enslaved blacks, the white elites had to teach whites the value of their whiteness. Right? I got that quote from somewhere. I forget who said it. Thus, white elites fueled white superiority as a means of divide and conquer. All right, by 1860, even the Civil War, the rich slave plantation owners knew the political reality, and they had no future within the Union. The only way they could maintain the system that brought them great wealth was to secede. To secede meant war, and they were too few to fight. Therefore, they needed the southern masses, the poor whites, to fight for them. Just as they had used racism in the past to manipulate the masses, they used it again as fear mongering, as a scare tactic, to mobilize the poor whites to fight for them by attaching self-serving self-interest. All the while, there was zero move in Congress to free the slave. There was zero chance for such a bill passing, even if there were a bill, which there wasn't. The North alone, by the end of the war, barely passed it by only 2 votes, and that's with Lincoln buying votes. Given this, there would be zero chance that it would pass with all the slave states voting. There would be zero chance that such a bill, if passed, would be ratified. So it's not going to pass, and then it's not going to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. Because all it takes is a little more than half of the slave states to vote against it, and they're all going to vote against it. There is zero chance that such a bill would be introduced because it would cause a war. And it's been proven that the North would do anything to bend over backwards to prevent a war, offering permanent protection for slavery and promoting it by expanding it. Thus, the fear-mongering threat of freeing the slaves was phony, but it worked to the extent that Southern people were gullible. Now, not all were gullible, so they had to be forced by law. The Southern people feared black threats to their job, and thus homes, food, and tables. You free the blacks, well, they're free to compete with you for your jobs, which means they're there to compete with your homes and feeding your kids. The Southern people feared loss of sense of status and self-worth, for they would now be a level closer to the freed blacks. All right. What made them feel something is their sense of superiority and just being white. All right. So again, they're using racism to whip up support for their war.